so first question for Alshakim, where does the feedstock or base material come from?
Yeah, the feedstock or base material would come from whatever's in the solution. It depends on what's required to sustain the organism or what they grow on. So the entire structure is submerged in liquid media, and so it's whatever dissolved nutrients that are required that are present there.
Okay, awesome. To Francesco, membranes scale down really well, but do they scale up in the same way? Is new generation separation en route to reach cost parity with traditional methods?
Hello? Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So membranes scale are really the go-to solution when you're talking about 10 to 20 million standard cubic feet per day, which translated is like 150 to 200 Olympic swimming pools type of volume. For anything bigger, which is really up to the 200 million standard cubic feet per day, 500 even more, like the refinery scale, etc., it's definitely a much tougher comparison. So the economics, rather than being on the consistent double-digit percentage recovery, advantage or lowering the capital cost or the levelized cost of whatever molecule you're making, it's definitely more complicated, and it boils down to elements such as how much is the percentage of the molecule in the feed. So if that percentage of the molecule is below a certain threshold, in hydrogen, for instance, is like 60%, you can still have a very good advantage even at larger scale. And for instance, alternatives like PSA really cannot do that. And it depends on the contaminants that are present in the mixture, right? So the answer is really it depends, and I would love to go through kind of the details on what are the applications that this person has in mind, because I think it would really be insightful. And yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Great. So there's a question here about infrastructure. So real estate and building the infrastructure for onshoring isn't really talked about. What needs to change in the regulatory and zoning environment for these efforts to become successful? Maybe a question for DARPA as well. I'm not sure. Oh. Not to throw in the deep end.
So when it comes to regulatory approvals, there are multiple things that affect chemical manufacturing. If your factory or your production facility happens to be near an urban location or an area that is zoned for residential buildings, you cannot store chemicals beyond a certain volume. It's very simple. And then there is this other agency that we work with called DEA. They love to know what you make because you don't want Breaking Bad sprouting up everywhere. So, again, these are all the simple things that affect it, but these are all not insurmountable things. If you want to locate your factory on a box and move it around like in Winnebago, I'm kidding, no, don't do that. Those are all things that are not quite clear yet, and hopefully those things would become clear if there is enough mass to consider these challenges as we move along.
Great. So this question is specifically for Hiro, about what was the most impactful failure Talus experienced when scaling to deployment of multiple systems and your learnings, and maybe also another question for startup founders and scaling their company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're actually on that point, we're actually hosting with our investors in a couple of weeks our lessons learned from our first 2 deployments. The short answer is there is no substitute for, we deployed our system into Chicago first, and that went, largely as expected, nothing too surprising. It took us around a month and a half to install. When we deployed it into Western Kenya, that first deployment took us 5 months. And again, like nothing was super surprising, but it is availability of local expertise, availability of parts that should be commonly available, and as a result of that, and one of the real attractions of decentralization and modularization is the ability to rapidly upgrade. And so, System 2 that was delivered a few months later we reduced interconnecting plumbing by 50%, reduced interconnecting electrical wiring by 50%. Right, it's something where when we did it in Chicago, it was fine, right? It didn't cause us any issues, but once we deployed into these remote locations, right, it was just a lot harder, right? One of our vendors installed pipes that were supposed to be stainless steel that were carbon steel, and it took us a while to figure that out. And so for us, it was mostly just working through all those and how we build, how we've redesigned our systems to have less work, and also really revamped our processes for catching those mistakes earlier than we did.
Yeah. Any other founders can share about their journey of scale up or in Europe or like Last Energy or 12?
So yes, Last Energy, we are currently active in 4 countries, but I think one of the really interesting stories that we can tell is how we actually started our go-to-market evaluation and strategy. There are roughly 50 plus countries where you can legally export nuclear technology to as a US company, and we kind of just started with that list. And like I say 50, there's less than 50 that you can do it legally, and there's like a few others that were maybe, you know, they could kind of move quickly through some of those legal processes. But for us, it was looking at kind of the critical question is where can we deploy this technology as quickly as possible? Where can we deploy our first of a kind systems the fastest? And because we were willing to look at the entire globe as the potential market, we were also able to look at the historical challenges that have made deploying nuclear technology slow, and circumnavigate those challenges. So the key for us, and I think you just touched on it, is regulatory, right? And Last Energy, I didn't really mention this, but we're a full service developer. So we don't just have like a widget that we sell, we actually build, own, and operate. So we see ourselves as an independent power producer. So we handle everything, which means we have to go through the licensing process, we have to do all the development work. It's really, really involved. So we looked at the markets where we could essentially, we called it regulatory shopping, right? Which regulators would we get along the best with? Which ones would be able to look at the unique aspects of our technology, of our safety case, recognize it for the merits that it has to be able to go through that process faster? And then also, of course, the critical factor is economics. So where can we find the first set of customers that wants to move with us on nuclear technology and be the first customers for a business-to-business nuclear transaction? It's traditionally done in the government-to-government space. And where do we have, you know, customers that are willing to pay a premium for the product that we provide, that, you know, clean baseload power. And so that really drove us ultimately to Europe and to the 4 countries we're active in today. So it was over maybe 2 to 3 year process. We still are constantly reevaluating, you know, are there markets where we could move faster in? But, you know, taking the time to ensure that you have product market fit was a key lesson that we started out with.